Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today we're diving deep into The Golden Bough by James George Frazer. It's a sprawling exploration of magic and religion and myth and ritual across cultures and time, from ancient Rome to modern-day tribal societies. It's going to be quite a journey.
It really is. Frazer uses this one very specific and somewhat obscure ritual. The story of the priest of Diana at Nemi, who had to kill his predecessor after plucking a golden bough from a sacred tree. He uses that as a launch pad to explore the broader patterns of human belief. It's like he's using a single thread to unravel a whole tapestry of human thought.
So we're going from this hyper-specific ritual murder to a global exploration of how humanity relates to the unknown?
Exactly. The book delves into how magic and religion were essentially intertwined for our ancestors. They believed they could directly influence the natural world through things like imitative magic. Imagine thinking you could make rain simply by pouring water on the ground.
I mean, it makes a kind of poetic sense, right? Trying to mirror the outcome you're looking for.
It does. But for them, it wasn't just poetry. It was a deeply held belief. This reflected a mindset where the lines between the natural and supernatural were very blurry. Eventually, as societies evolved, they started seeking control through more structured religion, things like prayers and sacrifices offered up to powerful gods.
So instead of mimicking rain, they pray to a rain god.
Precisely. And that brings us to another fascinating concept Frazer explores: the sacred king. This is a ruler who is believed to be intrinsically linked to the health and prosperity of their people and the land itself.
Like a living embodiment of the kingdom's well-being.
That's it. And to maintain that vital connection, some societies would even go as far as ritually killing their kings when they showed signs of weakness or age. They believed this transferred the king's essence, that spark of vitality, to a successor.
That sounds pretty intense. Do we have any real-world examples of this?
Oh, absolutely. Frazer talks about the Shilluk kings in Africa. Their lives depended on their ability to, shall we say, satisfy their many wives. Failure was seen as a sign of waning power and grounds for immediate replacement. Talk about pressure.
Wow. I guess succession planning was a little more direct back then.
Definitely. Now, Frazer also spends a good deal of time analyzing festivals and rituals, particularly those that mirrored the natural cycles of death and rebirth. Think of celebrations like the Roman Saturnalia or the Greek Thesmophoria.
So connecting human society to the rhythms of the natural world.
Exactly. And many of these festivals held hidden layers of meaning, connected to ancient myths and primal fears. Take the Roman Saturnalia, for example. It was a time of wild revelry where societal roles were reversed and a mock king was chosen.
That's interesting. Why a mock king?
Well, Frazer suggests it might be a fading echo of a much older and darker practice, the ritual sacrifice of a real king at the end of his reign.
That's like a sanitized version of something much more primal.
That's a great way to put it. And that ties into another fascinating thread in the book, The Corn Spirit. Frazer noticed that many agricultural societies personified the spirit of the corn in either human or animal form.
So they weren't just planting seeds, they were tending to a living spirit.
That's right. And to ensure a bountiful harvest, they'd often perform a sacrifice of this corn spirit representative. Imagine that, believing you had to give a life to sustain life.
It sounds brutal to us, but I guess it speaks to how vital the success of their crops was to their survival.
Absolutely. It was a matter of life and death, quite literally. Frazer even connects this to the myth of Lityerses, a king in Phrygia who challenged strangers to reaping contests and, here's the twist, ended up getting killed himself.
So was Lityerses a representation of the corn spirit then? And by killing him, they were ensuring a good harvest.
Frazer suggests that's a very real possibility. It shows how deeply intertwined these myths and rituals were with the practical needs of their daily existence. Now, we can't talk about the Golden Bough without delving into the realm of myths and their deeper meaning.
Right, because for Frazer, these weren't just stories, were they? They were explanations for the world around them.
Exactly. He analyzes myths from all over, like those of Adonis, Balder, and Osiris, and he finds this recurring theme of a god who dies and is reborn.
The dying god. It's a pretty universal concept, isn't it?
It is. And Frazer suggests this idea resonates so deeply because it mirrors the natural cycles we see all around us, the changing seasons, the birth, death, and renewal of all living things. It's a pattern that's been woven into the human experience since the very beginning.
So even though we may not believe in these gods, literally the underlying symbolism still speaks to us on a subconscious level.
I think so. Think about our fascination with heroes who sacrifice themselves for a greater cause, or even the way we celebrate holidays like Easter and Christmas, which, despite their modern religious context, still hold echoes of those ancient themes of death and rebirth.
It's like those primal beliefs are woven into the fabric of our culture.
Exactly. And what about sympathetic magic? We might laugh at the idea of sticking pins in a voodoo doll today, but let's be honest, haven't we all knocked on wood for good luck at some point?
Guilty as charged. So even the most rational among us have these little vestiges of magical thinking.
Frazer helps us understand where those come from, the deep psychological roots that connect us to those ancient ways of seeing the world.
Now, speaking of ancient ways of seeing the world, let's talk about taboos. The Golden Bough dedicates a lot of time to those, doesn't it? Those strict rules about objects or actions that were forbidden.
Yes, and what might seem arbitrary to us today actually served a vital function in those early societies. Taboos help maintain order, social cohesion, and even basic hygiene.
Like the taboos around certain foods, right?
Yes. In many cultures, there were strict rules about what you could and couldn't eat. This wasn't always for religious reasons, but often because those foods might be dangerous to consume, particularly at certain times of the year or for certain people.
So taboo is a form of early health code.
You could say that. And what about the taboos surrounding contact with the dead? They seem superstitious to us, but it's highly likely they evolved as a way to prevent the spread of disease.
Makes sense. It seems like a lot of what we might label as irrational belief often had a practical basis, if you look at it through the lens of their understanding of the world.
That's a key insight from Frazer. He's not saying those beliefs were right, but that they made perfect sense within the context of what they knew and believed at the time. Now, the Golden Bough also touches on the role of women in these early societies, though it's important to acknowledge that Frazer's views on gender reflect the limitations of his time.
Of course. But there's still some interesting observations in there, right?
Yes. For example, he points out that in many cultures, women held a central role in agriculture and fertility rituals. Their connection to the cycles of nature was deeply respected, even revered.
Like the goddesses of agriculture and fertility. Demeter in Greek mythology and Ceres in Roman mythology.
Precisely. They were powerful figures, symbolic of abundance and the life-giving force of nature. It reminds us that women's contributions were often essential, even if they weren't always acknowledged in the way we might think of today.
So Frazer, even with his own biases, inadvertently reveals how vital women were to these early societies.
Yes, and I think that's a valuable takeaway. Now, I have to admit, when I first read The Golden Bough, I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information Frazer throws at you. It's a massive, sprawling work, almost encyclopedic.
It's like he's trying to capture the whole of human experience in one book.
He is, in a way, and while his interpretations have been debated and challenged over the years, the sheer scope of his research, his effort to connect the dots across cultures and time periods, remains a landmark achievement.
It's a dense read, but ultimately a rewarding one, right?
Absolutely. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish it, prompting you to question your own assumptions about the world, and to marvel at the complexities of human belief and behavior.
Now, I know The Golden Bough can be a bit, shall we say, intense with its descriptions of ancient rituals and sacrifices. It's not for the faint of heart.
That's true. But it's crucial to remember that Frazer is simply presenting these practices as they were recorded, without judgment or sensationalism.
He's not condoning them, just trying to understand them in their historical context.
Exactly. And by understanding these darker aspects of human history, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the progress we've made and the importance of values like compassion and respect for human life.
It's striking how Frazer keeps finding these recurring patterns across cultures and throughout history. It's like he's highlighting the interconnectedness of human experience.
It's one of the book's most compelling aspects. Frazer seems to be suggesting that beneath the incredible diversity of human cultures, there's this common thread of belief and experience that binds us all together.
So even though the specific myths and rituals may differ, the underlying themes are universal.
Exactly. Think about the concept of the sacred king. We've talked about examples from ancient Rome and Africa, but Frazer finds similar beliefs in societies as far-flung as pre-Columbian America. This idea that the ruler's well-being is intrinsically tied to the fate of the entire community. It seems to resonate across time and geography.
And the rituals around death and rebirth, those echoes pop up everywhere. From ancient Egyptian mythology to our modern-day Easter celebrations. It's like these core themes are so deeply embedded in the human psyche that they transcend cultural boundaries.
That's a powerful insight. Frazer's work encourages us to look beyond the surface, to see those common threads that connect us as human beings. Regardless of where or when we live, it's like we're all drawing from this shared wellspring of myth and symbolism.
It makes you wonder what Frazer would make of our modern world, a world that's increasingly secular, scientific, and driven by technology. Do you think you'd be able to connect those same ancient patterns to modern life?
It's a fascinating question to ponder. I imagine he'd be both fascinated and perhaps a bit troubled by the rapid advancements of technology and our growing detachment from the natural world, but I also think he'd be able to draw some intriguing parallels between ancient rituals and some of our modern-day behaviors.
Like what? What modern-day rituals do you think would catch his eye?
Well, think about the fervor around celebrity culture, the way we elevate certain individuals to almost mythical status, or the rituals of consumerism, the endless cycle of acquiring new possessions, almost as a way to stave off some existential dread. Those might be seen as modern expressions of those ancient desires for connection, meaning, and a sense of control over our lives.
It's like those ancient impulses are still there,
Yeah.
just channeled into different forms.
Precisely. And perhaps by looking through the lens of the Golden Bough, we can gain a deeper understanding of those impulses and how they continue to shape our world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Golden Bough, what's the key takeaway you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to approach this book with an open mind and a willingness to step outside our modern perspective. Try to see the world through the eyes of those who came before us, to understand the logic and meaning behind beliefs and practices that might seem strange or even abhorrent to us today.
It's a reminder that we're all part of this grand, ongoing story of humanity, a story that stretches back thousands of years and connects us to every culture and every generation that came before us. And by understanding that past, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world we live in today.
Beautifully put. If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I highly encourage you to explore The Golden Bough for yourself. It's a challenging read, but ultimately a rewarding journey into the heart of human belief and behavior.
And if you're ready to embark on that journey, you can find a link to purchase The Golden Bough in the episode description. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insightful deep dives into the world of ideas. Until next time, keep those minds mindful.